Hey now, today I'm going to be brewing a Belgian IPA, or a triple IPA if you will. For this, my thought is to have a grain bill and hop bill that are mostly American inspired, go with a really cool Belgian yeast strain for fermentation, something higher alcohol, kind of lighter on the grain bill insofar as specialty malts go. And yeah, I'm hoping it'll just be like drinkable, boozy, and delicious. So let's take a look at the grains. Now for this grain bill, I'm going with mainly a base of North American two-row. I'm using Rahr two-row for this. I am going with 20% Pilsner malt in here, Weyermann Pilsner malt, because I really like the graininess that it provides, and I think that small addition, relatively speaking, of it will provide just a little bit of graininess that I think will pair really nicely with the yeast. But it will also probably not make it so that I need to go with a 90-minute boil or anything like that. I shouldn't be too worried about DMS or anything. I'm going with 5% Weyermann Vienna malt, just for a little bit of toastiness, and then just 3.5% of this top grain here, which is just a Crystal 40, just for a little bit of color, a little bit of sweetness in there, residual sweetness. One thing that I'm adding to this as well that is not going in here, obviously, is Jaggery powder, which is like an East Indian, just unrefined cane sugar. I've got Jaggery powder that I'll be adding in during the last part of the boil. That'll just give us a little bit more color addition, and some kind of that sweetness character, but hopefully will also, it might help us out with attenuation. And the other thing that I've noted with Jaggery when I've used it in the past is that it can provide just a little bit of interesting mouthfeel. So we'll see how that plays in this beer. So it's time to get this all milled up. All right, so I'm wearing a dust mask here because I find I don't react super well to all the grain dust that's created during this. I don't want to be coughing for the rest of the day. So I'm just going to fire up my Monster Mill 3mm Pro. I love having this hopper extension on here. I can fit usually all of my grain in here in one fell swoop. So I'm just going to get this milled up and then we'll be ready to mash in. All right, so I've got my water sitting at around 54 Celsius. I'm shooting for somewhere right around 52 Celsius, kind of near the lower end of that protein rest temperature. And so it'll be about in the low 120s Fahrenheit. I also added some pH stabilizer to this water, just because I find with the water here in Calgary that for these lighter brists, if there's no roasted malts in there, the pH tends to be a little bit out of whack. So I'll do this. Now I'm doing the protein rest just because of that Weyermann malt. I find with it, while I love that malt, a lot of the times I can wind up with a relatively hazy beer, or hazier than I want anyway if I don't do a protein rest. I don't know if it's just the bags of it that I happen to have got over the years or whatever. But anyway, we'll get this all nicely mixed. Just about. There we go. Oh, a couple little balls in there still. All right, and just let me get mash tun lid on here. Ooh, just raise that up a little bit. Love that lock line. Makes this recirc situation pretty sick. And just time to start that up. Yeah, so I'm going to give this just a couple of minutes and then I'll start to step it up. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time at this protein rest temperature, but this will be enough to activate those enzymes a little bit before they get denatured with the higher temperature. I always like to check out the difference in the malt a minute or so into a mash and compare it with afterwards after all the starch is converted. So yeah, check out, it's just super opaque. Yeah, no fingers through that at all. So after 5 minutes, I'm just jumping this up to 62.8 Celsius. It's in that 145 Fahrenheit range. And once it gets up to this temperature, I'm going to leave it for 45 minutes and just do a really nice low-end amylase rest there, the beta. So after that 45 minutes of that beta amylase rest, you can see here it's quite a bit clearer. I'm now going to be bumping it up to 67.8 Celsius, so that 154 Fahrenheit range. We'll let it mash for 45 minutes there, doing the alpha rest, and then we're going to mash out. After the 45 minutes of that second step of the mash, this is some beautiful crystal clear wort. So I'm going to take that up to 75 Celsius or like 168 or so Fahrenheit just to mash out for 15 minutes. Alright, so after that mash out, I've begun the process of running off into my boil kettle and fly sparging here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now that I've got enough, steamy in there. We've got enough wort in there that I'm above my sight glass line. I'm going to add the first hop. So I'm first wort hopping here with 56 grams of green bullet hops. So this is kind of where I deviate a little bit from American. I'm using these New Zealand hops, but I think they should be good because they can offer that kind of dark fruit, a little bit of pininess maybe, possibly some spiciness as well that I think will pair really well with the yeast and in this style. So I'm going to go ahead and let that first wort hop and collect what I need here for wort. So I've got just over 20 liters in the boil kettle already, so it is time to fire up the boil kettle. This always hilarious moment. Woo! Flame on! It's that terrifying moment when you have to decide whether this is a beautiful first wort hop approaching a boil or some sort of crazy organism that's come to life and is getting ready to attack you. So we've got a nice little boil going on here, just a 60-minute boil, and no hops will be going in until 15 minutes remaining, so I've got a little time just to get everything else cleaned up. Alright, so I've got 20 minutes left in the boil. I'm actually going to add the Jaggery powder at this point because this is a ½ kilogram and it might actually kill this boil a little bit, so I don't want to add it after I've added any more hops, just because that will, it's got a big splat in the face. I don't want it to impact the boil and change the utilization of those hops. I'm going to fire that in there, then I'm going to quickly give it a stir just to make sure that none of that sugar is sticking to the bottom or burning. And then I'll probably add just a minute or so here to the boil. And then in a few minutes it's time to add the next round of hops. All right. All right, with 15 minutes left, I'm going to be adding 56 grams of Mosaic, so that should hopefully be punching up the tropical fruitiness and whatnot in the hop flavor there. 10 minutes left, I'm just throwing in some super moss for clarification. And with 5 minutes left, another 56 grams of these Mosaic hops. All right, and flame out, time for the flame out hops. We've got another 56 grams of green bullet and then 28 grams of Mosaic, and I'm going to quickly whirlpool and cover this up. There we go, we have everything running off through the plate chiller there. I'm going to fill up both these carboys and get them downstairs. Alright, so looking below the meniscus there, we're coming in at about 1076 OG. Perfect. Okay, so given the higher gravity of this beer, even though I've got a really nice big healthy pitch of yeast, I'm going to go ahead and give it some O2 here. So I'm just going to give it a minute. Here, I'll time it and I'll swirl it up really nicely while it's doing it. Just using a diffusion stone and a little oxygen tank here. All right, now I'm on to the next one. It is important to make sure that you've waited until your beer is up at your pitching temperature and it's not going to be increasing a bunch in temperature after that, just because as the beer warms up, it would then actually push the gas out of solution, so you would just be wasting it. All right, so there we go. Now I need to wait until this foam dies down before I can get my starters in there. I might cheat and just throw a drop of some foam destabilizer into there, because that'll help speed that up. All right, I am ready to pitch here. And so what I've got here are two different yeast starters that were originally 4,000 ml starters that I crash cooled for just over a day and a half, and then decanted off, keeping almost all of the yeast there, and then I just had them on the stir plate heating up. This is Brewtech CL320, which is basically my favorite Belgian triple yeast strain to use. It's amazing. Pretty hard to find. I've got this one on Slant. I've had it for many years. If you can't find that and you're trying to do a recipe like this, just your favorite Belgian triple or Belgian yeast strain will do. Something that can handle, you know, a little higher alcohol with no problem, and attenuates nice and low. There's number one. And number two. Just gonna pour this here, and then get them capped, get the carboy hoods and blow-off tubes and everything like that all put on here. Okay, so I got my carboy hoods on, heat probes in there, blow-off tubes all set up, and yeast is pitched, so we're looking good. Just gonna wait for fermentation to kick off. Currently sitting at 66 Fahrenheit, and once fermentation kicks off, I'll start to ramp it up. So, 16 hours in, I think we might still be waiting for high krausen. You know, pretty hard to tell sometimes, but maybe we'll get there. All right, so we are on day 5 now of this Belgian IPA fermentation, and I actually want to jack the original gravity just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sugar syrup, a brown sugar simple syrup that's going to be added to the fermenters. Now it's going to be really thick. I don't want to add a whole bunch of water. So what I've got here is 400 grams of best brown sugar, which is going to offer like a really nice flavor. It shouldn't adjust the color too much or anything like that. It'll add some nice sweetness to it and flavor, but it's also going to bump up that original gravity right around to the 1080 range from that 1076. I'm going to be mixing that into 200 grams. I weighed all this stuff out. 200 grams or 200 mils of filtered water here, and I'm just going to heat that up a little bit on this ceramic heat plate. If the water itself's warmer, when I go to add the sugar, it should just mix in a little bit nicer. So I'm going to get this heated up. I'm going to prep a foil cover for it. You could also do this in a pot, but I do want to basically pasteurize this as well, so it's going to be on here for a little bit. And by having that cover on, that foil cap, I'm not going to be allowing bacteria or anything to get into there while it's heating up. So that's really nice. So once this is warmed up, we'll add the sugar. All right, so I've let this get reasonably warm here. We're actually up around the temperatures I want for pasteurization, like that 130, 140 Fahrenheit range. So I'm going to start to add this sugar. I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to put in here initially, because I do want to kind of like stir it in, make sure everything's kind of dissolving. For now, I might just be able to get away with that. I do have a longer spoon that I will use probably here in just a minute. This was a slightly wider flask. Anyway, I'm just going to keep spooning this in. All right, pretty much all that sugar. I'm going to stir it up as well as I can. So I'm not going to bring this to a boil. Rather, I'm just going to get it to a really nice simmer. One of the nice things about using this flask is that I'm able to easily register the temperature without having to mess around with a thermometer actually inside. I can just use my remote thermometer to get that. I'm just going to cap this back up here and just ensure that the bottom is clean, which it should be. Get it back on here, and I'm going to heat it up to around 130, 140 Fahrenheit. All right, so I got this thing up to about 145 Fahrenheit and let it sit here for a half hour, including all that heating up time. This is totally pasteurized. And if we take a look at it here, we're looking at just under 500 mils, according to these demarcations here, at this temperature. So I'll be able to kind of split it evenly between the carboys. All right, so here we are with the carboys. You can see that krausen got super high, but I managed to get it down a little bit. As of today, I've got the temperature up at 69 Fahrenheit. Tomorrow I'll get it up to 70, and we'll just keep ramping it up once or twice a day until we are at about 72. And now I'm going to just kind of split this evenly, and hopefully I won't burn my hand. This is a little bit warm, but not too crazy. So let's do this. I realize that this isn't completely precise because I'm going to be eyeballing it, but it'll be good enough for our purposes here. Just about. Down to about 275. It's real fun trying to deal with thermal wells here and not accidentally smash into anything. Okay, we got that all in there. I'll try and push that stuff back down as I go. All right, perfect. Let's give these a little jostle. Woo! Try not to have a massive explosion of foam here. And yeah, good enough. I'm gonna just let them keep going. So these Belgian IPAs finished off at 1017 there for a finishing gravity. So I killed the heat on them and let them sit for a few days just to let a bunch of that yeast and stuff flock out. So now it's time to pressure transfer and then into some sanitized corny kegs, gelatin fine, and then transfer into carbonation kegs. So this Belgian IPA finished off at 8.2% ABV, and it's carbonated. It's on tap. So I think it's time to try this out. Well, let's see what we've got here. I think I'm in love with this beer. It's got this beautiful, toasty, light caramelly character coming out of those Vienna and crystal malts. I think that Jaggery powder kind of helped contribute a little bit of that flavor to it as well, but giving it some of that silkiness that I'm getting here too in the mouthfeel. Just the right amount of bitterness, comparable to a nice double IPA, and lots of hop character. So it's got the spiciness coming out of those green bullet hops. It's got the tropical fruit flavors and a little bit of that earthiness coming out of the Mosaic, and that spicy, peppery Belgian yeast character really coming through and complementing that hop selection really quite well. And then with enough residual body, it finished at 1017, right? So that's keeping that, it's giving it enough body to kind of help balance out with the bitterness there, and also just a little bit of alcohol warmth because of that very carefully controlled fermentation. So the verdict here is that this is a winner, and that's just, look at that, that's just a beautiful beer there. I absolutely love that color, and yeah, definitely recommend this. Find your favorite Belgian, sort of like a Belgian triple yeast strain, and give her a whirl. And until next time, keep her at 11.